morning, Mr. Davis. You will have 10 minutes to address the committee, sir. You can begin when you're prepared. Thank you.
When I'm prepared. Unfortunately, I had a derailment this morning. My printer and my laptop didn't want to communicate. My bifocals are broken, so the moral of my story is I do understand that things don't always go as planned.
Thank you.
Chairman Marks, committee members, visiting councillors, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you at, I guess this is your inaugural committee meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody, new and old councillors, and like I said, thank you for the opportunity. Corporate Services is probably the most important committee of council that we have. You set the tasks, you set the procedures and the policies that our staff follow and that each and every other committee uses throughout the year and throughout your term. So you're probably the most important management type committee that we have. And it was quite interesting here today to listen to the 3 earlier presentations. Because I don't have my bifocals and because they have really distracted me with some of the great information that they've provided, I'm going to ad-lib a little bit here today. One of the most important parts of accountability and transparency of the City of Oshawa and any government is the dissemination of information to the public. And I have to note that as of 5 o'clock on Friday, there is not a single copy of meeting minutes from this council since December the 5th. This is an issue that I brought up with staff 2 to 3 years ago with regards to missing and late minutes. And we just heard from the Corporate Communications Department. I don't think it technically falls under them. I think it's more under Clerk Services. But I think that that's an issue that maybe this committee should look at as to how quickly those minutes can get posted and available to the public. Most of us get our information off your city's website. The numbers that were relayed by the last speaker, only 1,800 people follow your Instagram, 1.2 million hits on Facebook. Well, that could be just about anything, but most of us use your website. The website was updated a couple of years ago and is now one of the most difficult websites I have ever seen to find accurate information. I believe industry standard is you should be able to find something in 2 to 3 clicks, and if you try and search something on the new updated city website, it takes literally hundreds of clicks, and I would estimate I've spent thousands of hours on it. For those of you that don't know me, I've been involved in Freedom of Information requests with the City of Oshawa for the past 5 years. I'll go back and forth and say I and we quite often in this because I work with a small group of other citizens. We collaborate somewhat with our FOI requests and the work that we do. We as a group right now have 5 Freedom of Information requests under appeal at the IPC. They go back to 2017, 2015, and one even goes back as far as 2013. City of Oshawa has a long history of not being able to find records when we do an FOI request. And the records management system, in my opinion, is sadly inept. Back in 2013, and of course this is where it all began, we had the purchase of property to build the Consolidated Works Depot at 199 Wentworth Street. You then had the AG 1309 report, which strongly suggested that the city overpaid anywhere between $1.6 and $2.3 million of our money. Your money and my money, taxpayers' money. City spent over $100,000 to hire an investigator. And one of the recommendations in Mr. Rustyi's final report was that the city needed to update the definition of what records were and that they needed a new records management system. In, I believe, May of 2014, a motion of council was made to have staff develop and implement a new records management system, which was supposed to have been done by the third quarter of 2015. We're now in the first quarter of 2018, and we still do not have an updated records management system. That's part of the reason why our appeals are 2, 3, and 5 years old at the IPC, because the city can't find information. Your facility management services presentation that I just listened to was quite interesting, in particular their internal technical support program, where they log all tech requests, including conversations, phone calls, emails, etc. Emails, telephone calls, all of those are technically records of the business of the City of Oshawa. And currently, your records management system does not capture many of those things. It's been known since at least 2009 that staff have been regularly deleting emails, and that still hasn't changed. I have records provided through the FOI process, written records from the city, that will acknowledge that at least in 2009, if not earlier, the Auditor General knew it and reported it. The city solicitor knew it. The IT services knew it. And the mayor and council knew it. And it still has not been addressed. The city is sadly remiss in meeting legislated standards through the Municipal Act 2001, particularly Part 5, and through MFIPA. All 5 of our appeals that are currently in front of the IPC have to do with reasonable search. One of those is in its 3rd appeal, and the city has already been ordered by the IPC on at least 2 occasions to conduct a further search, and has failed to do so. I think it's imperative that as this council moves into budget deliberations, that you understand where your issues are, where the problems are, so that you can properly finance, you can properly provide the leadership and the resources to your staff to do their jobs. Ultimately, it comes back to council. It's your responsibility to provide them with everything they need. You can't blame council, or you can't blame staff. You can't hide behind staff like our past council has done. In June of 2018, the city released what I call their admission of guilt statement, in which they admitted that staff have been less than transparent in providing us with responses to our Freedom of Information Access requests. They promised the release of all documents by August 23rd, 2018. August 23rd, 2018 rolled around, and the next release available on the city's website provided us with approximately 100 pages, being AG 1309, and a message that there are as many as 10,000 more pages to be released and no release date. I've emailed with the city clerk, and the city clerk is unable to give me a date as to when those records will be available. So that was a self-imposed deadline that the city put upon itself and has still failed to meet. And that doesn't look good. I really want to work with City Council through this committee to improve the relationship between the city and the citizens. I want to work with you to improve the information flow going in and out, because that's how we all progress and do better. I can't do that when I've had to go out and rent an office space because I've outgrown my home because of the files that I have over 5 years. I shouldn't have to do that to get what should be pretty standard documents. I shouldn't have to fight the city's legal team in order to access those documents. And I know that at the end of the previous council, there was a motion put forth, I believe, by Councillor Neal, to request a report from city staff with regards to the FOI process how many FOIs they had in front of them. I don't remember all of those details, but I think maybe it might be advisable that this committee also ask how much money has been spent to keep this information hidden. How much in lawyers' fees? How much in staff overtime? According to the August 23rd press release, clerk staffs have spent over 1,000 hours, and all they could produce for me
Mr. Davis, your 10 minutes is up.
was 100 pages.
Motion to extend. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. After 5 years, I could talk for days, okay, so I will try and do this real quick. I believe that we need to be proactive on this, and I believe that the city, this committee particularly, needs to address the lack of a records management system. I believe that, I know that you guys have had training from the ministry recently. I believe that some of your staff who are charged with FOI responses need better training as well. And I think that that's a very important thing that you need to consider now. I think that's far more important than digitizing maps for economic development at this time. You've already had over 5 years since the Rusty Eye report, almost 4 years since council asked staff to update it, and I think it's time that it's actually in the last term fell off the outstanding issues report of this committee. Just disappeared. And we have to get that back in check. Thank you for your time, and if there are any questions, I will gladly answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. We're going to have questions now from the committee. The first question is Councillor Neal.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interject. We have a tour at Rotary Pool at 11:30, and I'm the chair of Community Services, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to take my leave at this time, but I thought I'd just interject so I didn't walk out rudely.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Neal, your question.
Yeah, and this might be a question to staff. Do we not have an outstanding list that usually like accompanies an agenda for Corporate Services Committee?
We should deal with the questions to the delegation first, and once the delegation is done, we can ask staff our questions.
Okay. Well, I'll ask Mr. Davies then. Do you ever look at the outstanding list?
Quite often.
Okay. Then, through Mr. Chair, do you see anything on the outstanding list that's coming forward that might be of interest? Like you've listed quite a few things.
As I noted, it used to be on the outstanding list, the update for records management. The name of it changed last year, and it has now disappeared off the outstanding issues report for this committee. I don't know where it went, so I don't know where that stands.
All right. I guess subsequent to that question, I guess when you request like information from the city, like where is my item on the outstanding list, do you get an answer back? Or have you ever made that request? Or are you just bringing this forward today?
No, I have brought that forward in the past. It's quite some time ago, and I can't recall the exact answer. I normally do get a response, yes, but I can't recall the exact answer that I was given at that time. I'd have to go back through my records and check.
Okay. And through Mr. Chair, I'll be asking staff when the appropriate time is where's the outstanding list, and when are we going to get an updated outstanding list?
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Mr. Davis, you have great amount of experience in dealing with FOI requests.
I learned by trial and error over the past 5 years. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson.
Yes. When the city is found at fault and the IPC Commissioner rules that information must be released, does the city reimburse the applicant for all the expenses involved in getting the information in the first place?
Absolutely not.
Is that something that you would support? That if the city is found at fault, the city should pick up the cost?
Generally speaking, and not always, but generally speaking, the city has gotten better, and when they are ordered to do a new release of documents, they tend to not charge us for the additional materials. However, we have had no less than 6 fee responses in excess of $11,000, which we simply cannot afford to pay, and that's what the city expects us to pay in order for them to find those records.
Those are my questions at this point.
Thank you. Any other questions of the committee? Visiting councilors, Councilor McConkey.
Thank you. In addition to questions of the delegation, when would I be allowed to request a visiting staff person to come to the table?
Once all the questions have been exhausted to the delegation.
Okay, because I would like to, I mean, this happens, right? We can talk to the clerk who's in the room or the city manager to find out where this got missed.
Once all the questions have been dealt
Okay,
with the
thank
delegation. Any other questions of the delegation? Thank you, Mr. Davis, for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
First, I'll take a motion on the delegation. Councilor Neal?
Yeah, and I guess we don't have a report that would, just a question to you. I guess we don't have a report that this would refer to, or do we? Would
Nope.
we refer it to the one of the other presentations or any of the correspondence requiring action?
We can refer the delegation to staff.
Refer it to staff.
All those in favor? Oh, sorry. Discussion on the motion.
Is there discussion? I don't believe in refer to staff unended, open-ended motions because I don't know what I'm getting back. I would like to see, my personal view, that a status report be prepared and presented on the ongoing free information inquiries at the next meeting of this committee, including costs and staff time used to date. And I think that, you know, I'm a firm believer that when you give staff a direction, you have to tell them what you want them to report on and have a timeline to get that back. Otherwise, it will go into the great void, and we will see it sometime 3 terms from now. So I'm a firm believer in all the motions I'm going to present at this committee are going to be time-stamped, as I call it, with a direction and an expectation of when they're to come back. So the question I guess I would put through you, Mr. Chairman, on this motion, if I could, to the staff that are present, I don't know if there's anybody who can answer this, if we were to request a status report on the current FOI response, could we have that at the next meeting of the committee? Is there some reason that would preclude that timeline?
Commissioner Adams?
Through the chair, yes, we can do that.
All right. If the mover of the original motion were amenable, could we include that wording in his motion as a friendly amendment?
Well, we don't have to make it friendly. You can just make an amendment. Yeah.
All right. I was trying to give him credit, but being nice. I'd like to move an amendment to the refer to staff, and with the direction that a staff report be prepared and presented on ongoing freedom of information inquiries at the next meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, including an outline of staff time used to date and costs of response. I have that written out for you, by the way.
Sorry, you have that written out, Councilman?
Of course, I do.
Mr. Brower, you have a comment?
Through the chair, just to note, there was an outstanding council direction to report back to council through an information report on the status of the appeals in the IPC related to the construction of 199 Wentworth, the COD. So just for information, I'd be happy to include that as part of our presentation overview on City Clerk Services.
Is that particular process part of an ongoing information inquiry process at this time?
Sorry, can you say the question again?
Well, the motion is that all ongoing freedom of information requests be reported. So wouldn't that fall into that category?
Yes.
Okay, those are your questions. Thank you. So the first we're going to, oh, sorry, Councilor Hurst, do you have a question?
Could I have a clarification of the motion? Your motion, Councillor Nicholson, you want a status of all freedom of information requests with the city? All ongoing.
Sorry, your microphone's off, Councilor Nicholson.
word was all ongoing for information requests.
So you
If
want...
something's resolved, I don't want to deal with it.
Okay, so you want to know what they are, what they're pertaining to, for clarification?
Yeah, what they are, how much we've spent, the time we've spent on it, how much it's cost us so far, so we can make a status report on them. Those are outstanding.
Okay, thank you. Needed that clarified. Thank you.
Okay, so our first order of business is to, sorry, Mayor Carter?
I just want for clarification through you to the Commissioner. Commissioner, you feel that you would be able to meet the timeline in regards to this request of this motion?
Through the chair, yes, we can.
And that next meeting would be on February the 4th?
Through the chair, yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So first, we'll deal with the motion, the amendment on the motion. All those in favor on the amendment? Opposed? That's carried. The next item is the main motion. All those in favor?
Recorded vote.
Councillor Neal's called a recorded vote. Madam Clerk?
And just before that, I still have a question to staff on this.
Certainly. We'll take the vote and then we'll have your questions done.
Okay.
Councillor Neal, yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Neal. Councillor
Yes.
Nicholson. Mayor Carter.
Yes.
Councillor Giberson is absent. Councillor Hurst.
Yes.
And Councillor Marks.
Yes.
That's 5 affirmative.
Now, Councillor Neal has a question to staff on this subject matter. I wonder if we could have his question now.
Yeah. Will we have an updated outstanding list, and will these matters that, through Mr. Chair, will these matters that Mr. Davis talked about, would they be on the outstanding list? Like, I know I made the motion in regards to the FOI requests back on council a while back, so.
I've just been informed by staff that the outstanding items list is quarterly and will be out in March, if that answers your question, sir. That's the schedule for the outstanding items list.
Okay.
I believe Mr. Brower has a comment as well. Councillor Neal.
Okay.
Through the chair, I could just provide a little bit of clarification on how that item had flowed through committee and council with regard to that. So in May of 2014, there was a report that was received, and it related to security and accessibility of electronic records, and that flowed out of the investigation that George Rusty undertook. At that time, the practice was when an item, when a report was written to committee, it would flow off of the outstanding items list. So it was reported to committee, and then it was in the hands of staff to track it after that point. What I think Mr. Davis is referring to, pardon me, is the business plan and the business plan updates. And that's the more recent tracking that went through committee. So the most recent update on that, on the records program revision and review, was that it would be presented after the election.
Councillor Nicholson, you had to follow up.
Follow-up. Will you then be providing us with...
Oh, excuse me. Sorry, Councillor Neal. I saw your light off. Excuse me. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Neal.
We appreciate that.
Well, when you got a cold, or whatever, you try and keep it to yourself. But in that question I had previous, where is the motion that I made to, like on the council floor? Like, where is that right now in regards to FOI? Like, what's the status of that? And that was made back in September, I think.
Mr. Brower?
Yeah, through the chair, we have just actually dealt with some of the appeals related to 199 Wentworth, and we were hoping to report to council committee after we had completed the work to provide the records related to that appeal. So that was why we had held on the timing. But it is still something on our list to follow up with.
Councillor Neal?
Yeah, and like there was another issue in regards to, I'm glad you brought up the Rusty thing, because Mr. Rusty, through Mr. Chair, you're not aware of this because it was the previous term to the previous term, was supposed to do an undertaking in regards to who he was talking to at the region about real estate. Mr. Rusty mentioned that he was talking to someone specifically at the region about the region wanting to purchase that property on Wentworth. Mr. Rustoy in public records said that he would supply that information. So I'm wondering if that possibly could be done, because Mr. Rustoy made the statement he would be doing that undertaking at the council meeting. So just throw that out. That's still not been done.
Yeah,
Thank
but I think we should leave our questions to sort of the process overview, not sort of to one specific request at this time. So, Mr. Brower, did you have any comments on that? No. Any other questions, Councillor Neal?
That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholson, you had a question. Your microphone's off, Councillor Neal.
One is simply to deal with the process overview. I'll withhold my question until the item is introduced by Councillor's portion of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Yes, sorry, Councillor McConkey.
I had a question of the clerk related to the delegation. I know you've spent a lot of time talking about the FOIs and touched on the records management system that I guess was from 2015 to be updated. Is that a request to have that updated involve a cost to the city, and has it been made in this budget, 2019 budget?
It is included as part of a business plan objective. We have not fully fleshed out how that work would be executed. It could involve consulting work, but at this point, the objective is there, and we're in the process of aligning ourselves internally to understand what work would be involved and how that might be delivered.
You heard the staff person, Mark Robinson, describe a software that they're implementing. Is there any way that the organization of what you require could piggyback onto that type of software?
So the focus of the review at this point is really around governance, looking back to the original direction. And it really does, and it's important to establish a revised retention bylaw, the policies and procedures in terms of how staff handle digital records, emails, information in databases. All of that work is more at a policy and process level. It isn't, at this point, it hasn't addressed a system that could help to support that. So just to give some context.
So perhaps you could have a conversation with Mr. Robinson and see if there's any fit in any portion of what you require?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Councillor Gray. Sorry, your microphone's off, Councillor Gray.
Councillor McConkey asked about the records management, so when we can expect that. And the second question I have is, this transaction was 5.5 or 6 years ago. Why don't we just release the information?
Okay, through the chair, that is actually a very valid point. The gap in time and the ability for us to look at the records and what might be considered sensitive or confidential does change. The other aspect I should note too is that in, I believe it was in August, we had sought council approval to waive solicitor-client privilege related to the records in that purchase, and that allowed us to put a different lens on how we evaluate the information to be disclosed, and in effect it allows for greater information to be disclosed. And the direction was that you know, obviously we need to ensure that we don't expose the city to any litigation or potential litigation, but beyond that, if there isn't that threshold, we would be looking at the mandatory exemptions, which would be personal information or third-party information. So we have tried to put a very open lens on it since that council direction and working through those records to make disclosure. But as noted, it was just simply the volume and the amount of other work we have ongoing. It's the same business unit that supports the election and the orientation program. So it's just simply a matter of resources to get the work done.
So it's strictly resources at this point?
And we're not asking for additional resources. We have a solid work plan, and we're working towards release.
So the delegation had said that the city said we're going to release everything by August some
23rd,
day,
yeah.
23rd,
Mm-hmm.
and we weren't able to accomplish that.
Correct.
Do you anticipate that will be done shortly?
I do, yes. Certainly within
So
this
shortly
quarter.
is
this quarter.
this quarter, so
Yes.
sometime between now and March.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. Councillor Nicholson. Your microphone, sir.
Just so I'm clear, so I understand clearly that, so we're going to get that information released no later than March 31st, 2019.
Barring any other issue, which we would certainly communicate.
You'll be back here asking for an extension if you can't meet that deadline. Would that be correct?
Yeah, so the decision to release is delegated under the provisions, but certainly we'll keep council in the loop on that, yeah.
Okay. Clarify that last answer to me. The decision on whether something is released is delegated to whom?
To the clerk as part of the FOI process.
And if council wanted to withdraw that delegation, what would council have to do?
It would have to rescind the delegation bylaw with respect to that.
Strangely, that's one of the items I had listed on my agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just a second thing, and again, this really doesn't really deal with the public, but many of us were not members of council during this ongoing, I use the word process, for any other wording I could use. What would we have to do to have the entire paper trail that occurred from the start of this process forwarded to members of council if they so requested it?
That's for a motion.
All right. I will raise that under items to be raised by other councillors at the end.
Thank you. Is that your questions, Councillor Nicholson? Thank you. Councillor Mayor Petrie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to ask the City Clerk if we can get a status report or at least just an understanding of when the process started, how long it's been. Yeah.
With respect to 199 Wentworth?
Yep.
Okay.
How long has it been offhand, do we know, since the issue has been considered by clerks?
Through the chair, we do track obviously the disposition of FOI requests and their status, and we have that information.
Okay. Would it be reasonable to say that it's been close to half a decade?
I think it depends on the particular request. Again, some of these decisions are well before my time, and but certainly we have that history.
Okay. We would also have the history of whether the legislation has changed in the last half decade. To my understanding, it hasn't.
That's correct.
Okay, so my question through you, Mr. Chair, then would be, when you make the comment as to the changing sensitivity
right.
Of who, if it's not the legislation, is it of the council and staff?
Possibly.
Okay.
Again, I wasn't involved in some of the earlier requests. I can only really speak to what I've been, involved with in the last couple of years. Again, with the direction from council, it's allowed us the opportunity to provide much more of the information that the requester is looking for. And there isn't the risk given the passage of time with respect to litigation, but certainly we still put that lens on there.
Okay, there are many other questions, but I think the answer is clear that, through you, Mr. Chair, in what the clerks advised, that this is not a legislative matter at this point. This is a question of council and staff. Thank you.
Any other questions of the committee? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on. Correspondence requiring action.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sorry, Mayor Carter.
Corp 1903 referred to staff for a report in regards to checking about with fire and also just regulations, the standing regulations at this particular time, and hopefully have a report back to committee sometime in May or June, as this event doesn't take place until the month of November.